At the train station, a man has died. I know the sequence of events better than anyone, as he collapsed right at my feet. The moment he fell, I immediately began administering first aid. I placed his limbs flat, loosened his collar, ensured his airway was clear, and started chest compressions. Without a moment's hesitation. This first aid knowledge is second nature to me. My mind seemed to have no time to react. My body was driven by muscle memory and moved quickly and tensely. As a doctor with years of experience, I performed chest compressions for over 10 minutes. But he still didn't regain a pulse or heartbeat. The train attendant was still nowhere to be seen. A young man in the crowd spontaneously called for an ambulance, but the call hadn't even connected yet. At that moment, another hand reached out and forcefully knocked his phone to the ground. The man appeared to be in his 40s or 50s, dressed in an elegant suit, topped with a finely crafted hat. His diamond-studded wristwatch radiated opulence. In a chilling tone, he said, "The train only comes to San Fan Island every 3 years. If people discover there's a corpse on board, we'll have to wait another 3 years." Upon hearing this, I was stunned. The passengers who had been discussing how to save this man fell silent. The young man calling for help reached for his phone, only to find several people had silently positioned themselves behind him, blocking his way. He looked at me anxiously, his voice trembling. "I can't just ignore this, right? Dr. Sullivan, what do you think we should do?" Someone in the crowd spoke up. "If we could save him, I wouldn't mind making the call. But if he's dead, we won't be going anywhere today." Indeed, how precious those tickets are. If we can't leave and he can't come back, it's truly a loss. "Dr. Sullivan, it's up to you to decide," everyone urged. I suddenly looked up, feeling the crowd's gaze pierce me like needles, causing me to feel uneasy, cold sweat trickling down my back. The successful-looking individuals remained silent, coldly observing me, their eyes drawn to their watches. One man tapped his watch's face, indicating I should pay attention to the time. Only 15 minutes remained before the train would depart. I had fought tooth and nail for this ticket, yet now there were just those damned 15 minutes left. In the dead silence of the carriage, even the sound of a falling needle could be heard. I pushed up my glasses, sweat streaming from my forehead to my chin. The attempt was futile. With a quivering voice, I announced, "Time, 11:15 a.m. The man is deceased." The crowd then hid the man's body in a large storage compartment and locked it, tacitly returning to their seats, each unwilling to comment further on the matter. As the train moved, everyone acted as if nothing had happened, chatting and laughing, or simply resting. When the attendant brought me champagne, I hid my trembling hands in my sleeves. "Dr. Sullivan, is it the excitement of leaving the island that's got you shaken?" At those words, the conversation stopped abruptly. Warning glances shot toward me. I quickly accepted the champagne and drank it down to steady my nerves. Indeed, I was looking forward to the attendant's sweet smile when she returned the empty glass. "Dr. Sullivan, have a pleasant journey." I paused for a moment before responding, "Have a pleasant journey. I was born on San Fan Island, a small, isolated island surrounded by sea. It's not backward. In fact, it's a developed place with ample resources to sustain every resident. The wealth gap is minimal, allowing everyone to live a happy and comfortable life, pursuing their dreams. The vast majority dream of boarding the ideal train to see the outside world. As a result, tickets for this journey are extremely hard to come by. Only those who have made outstanding contributions in their fields earn the privilege to board. Congratulations, everyone, for boarding this once-in-3 years ideal train." We gathered in the dining car of Carriage 6, where festive music typically reserved for San Fan Island's celebrations played. Everyone raised their glasses in celebration, and the atmosphere was joyful, with laughter echoing as we all toasted to the ideal train. Opulent dishes adorned the long table, people engaged in lively conversation. The earlier gloom seemingly dissipated for the moment. I sat alone to the side, unable to touch the perfectly cooked snowflake steak in front of me. Although I tried not to think about it, the image of that man's fainted face kept surfacing in my mind. He lay there with his eyes closed, not breathing. I desperately attempted to save him without pause. I did everything I could. Yes, I definitely tried my best. Suddenly, someone patted me on the back. "Relax a bit," said the successful-looking man with the diamond watch. He took off his hat, revealing a bald head, completely devoid of hair. "If you're this tense, don't you think everyone will start asking what happened?" I finally remembered where I had seen him before, His name was Jonathan Blake, a wealthy entrepreneur from San Fan Island. He sat across from me, and though he didn't say much, I could feel a powerful presence emanating from him. He pushed a drink towards me, indicating I should try it. It was a glass of pure vodka, over 40% alcohol. As someone who rarely drank, my throat burned on my first sip, causing me to cough involuntarily. He laughed, as if pleased with his little prank. "Dr. Sullivan isn't much of a drinker, huh? I often work night shifts for emergency care, always on call. Although we're not supposed to drink, I usually manage to down half a glass of ice water. It takes a while to recover," I replied with a smile. He continued the conversation. "Dr. Sullivan, how many surgeries have you performed? Have you kept count?" I hadn't counted myself. After finishing my water, I sat back, embarrassed to smile. The department had once awarded me a commemorative trophy for completing my 1,000th surgery, a significant achievement. "You're being too humble. It's truly deserved that Dr. Sullivan has a ticket for the ideal train." Jonathan held his glass, seeming not to intend to drink, unlike me, who just threw money around to get things done. "Those who can board the ideal train are accomplished in their respective fields," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "The rewards for the ideal train are for those who work hard and excel, not for someone like me, who's out for profit." He quietly pulled out a folded piece of white paper from his pocket. "I bought this ticket." My smile froze on my face. I didn't quite understand his meaning clearly. His ticket was purchased. I just didn't grasp why he was telling me this until I saw the unfolded white paper. It was a diagnostic report stamped with our hospital's red seal, indicating late-stage pancreatic cancer. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is less than 10%, with a mortality rate of nearly 100%. And he was already in the late stage. I wasn't sure if there were advanced medical technologies outside that could save him, but if he remained on San Fan Island, he would likely just wait to die in less than a year. "Dr. Sullivan, grant me a chance at life." Jonathan put his hat back on, covering his bald head caused by chemotherapy. His pleading tone sounded more like a warning. "Remember what to say and what not to say." That man was dead, but both Jonathan and I were still alive. Jonathan sought hope outside, while I yearned to see the real world, the world I had dreamed of for 33 years. It was a mysterious and magnificent world, filled with beautiful legends, perhaps everything I had been searching for. I had to keep the secret of that man's death. The train passed through a deep underwater tunnel, finally resurfacing above the azure sea. The ideal train circled round and round in the circular tunnel, leaving behind the island filled with memories. I recalled how, as a child, I loved to run along the tracks, enviously watching those sitting in the carriages. Now, sitting in the carriage, I gazed out at blooming cherry blossom trees, pink petals falling like rain in the wind, beautiful and dreamlike. My dream was finally about to come true. Why was I hesitating? It felt as though a heavy stone had dropped from my heart, clearing my mind. "Dr. Sullivan, due to safety checks not being fully completed, the connecting doors to adjacent carriages will be temporarily closed," said the attendant. I planned to head to carriage 3 for some rest, where the accommodations were even more comfortable than here. I politely smiled in response. Due to years of night shifts, I found myself shallow, and the events of the day made it hard to sleep. The single sleeping quarters on the train were spotlessly clean. The attendant continued to persuade me, "Many people want to take this train to leave San Fan Island, just like I do. Why not open up a few more seats?" "I'm sorry, Dr. Sullivan, but that's the rule for the ideal train," she said as she checked the windows and items one last time, afraid of missing something. "Only those who have achieved something in their work are eligible to board this train. And having fewer passengers is also to provide you with better service." She flashed a broad smile, showing her 8 perfect teeth. "Dr. Sullivan, is there anything else I can assist you with?" "No, thank you." "All right, see you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." After the attendant left, the lights in the carriage dimmed slightly. I was now alone in the carriage, the lively atmosphere of the day replaced by silence. The ideal train slowed down, and the roar of the engine ceased. Everything seemed ready for a peaceful sleep. As night fell, I felt drowsy, drifting into a light doze. Suddenly, a faint sound came from the storage compartment behind me, startling me awake. I was instantly alert. However, for the rest of the night until dawn, I didn't hear another sound. The noise seemed like just a figment of my imagination. How could that be? In such a quiet environment, with only me left in the carriage, how could I miss here? Morning arrived, and passengers from carriage 3 returned one after another. As they walked past, they noticed my stiff posture and pale face. The young man who had first called for help tapped my shoulder. "Dr. Sullivan, didn't you get any rest? You look terrible." "That man?" I pointed to the storage compartment, my eyes filled with confusion and disbelief, as if he hadn't died at all. At that moment, Jonathan happened to walk by on his way to breakfast and paused upon hearing my words. He made a quiet gesture, looking around to ensure no attendants were nearby, and spoke softly. "Dr. Sullivan, you shouldn't say such things. I'm not joking. I really heard a sound coming from the compartment last night. Shouldn't we open it and take a look?" I began to feel uncertain. The resuscitation lasted 10 minutes, and he didn't seem to recover any vital signs. But what if I was wrong? In that situation, making a mistake was understandable. If he had shown any signs of life and we left him locked in a sealed storage compartment without ventilation, wouldn't that be tantamount to killing him? "Mr. Blake, you have the keys. Please open it. I've been in medicine for 3 years. I absolutely cannot allow something like this to happen on my watch. No way," I stated firmly. Jonathan scoffed, his laugh laced with mockery and skepticism. His eagle-like gaze scrutinized me. "Dr. Sullivan, what do you mean by that? Are you the only good person here, while I, Jonathan Blake, am the villain?" "That's not what I meant," I quickly clarified. "Then what do you mean?" Jonathan took a step closer, his powerful presence forcing me into a corner. "You're saying he's dead, but now you're saying he's alive. What's going on?" I swallowed hard as the young man tried to mediate. "Mr. Blake, why don't we just open it and see? Mr. Blake, if it turns out to be a misdiagnosis, I'll naturally apologize. But right now, a life is at stake, and I ask you to set aside your accusations and save this person first. Besides, the train has already left, so your concerns are alleviated, right? Let's take a look." Jonathan twirled the key on his fingertips. I reached out, intending to grab it, but ultimately withdrew my hand. "Dr. Sullivan, if you want to save him, I'll agree. But I must tell you first, once this train departs, it won't turn back." Jonathan shot me a cold glance as he said, "There have been instances in the past where the train left and turned back." His words reminded me of an incident 6 years ago on the Ideal train. After departing the station, it returned days later. The reason was that someone was trying to smuggle themselves aboard and was caught by the attendant during a ticket check. This was the most severe incident since the Ideal train began its service. Because of this, the company was willing to pay hefty penalties rather than let anyone leave San Fan Island. Initially, just because of one smuggler, the Ideal train turned around without rescheduling any trips. What if it were discovered now that there was a dead body on board? If that's the case, I'll never be able to leave San Fan Island. I can't let that happen. After all my hard work over the past 3 years, treating patients and performing surgeries, wasn't it all for the chance to leave this island and see the world outside? Jonathan Blake looked at me, his gaze piercing. "Dr. Sullivan, are you really sure you want to save him?" I hadn't slept all night. My eyes were bloodshot, looking haggard and dazed. As I got up, I stumbled, but thankfully, Ryan Fisher was there to catch me. "Dr. Sullivan, are you all right?" I looked down, swallowing my nervousness. Wearing my white coat and seeing my reflection in the mirror, I noticed both my and Jonathan's shadows, both eagerly anticipating a new journey. Maybe I just misheard yesterday. The train stopped at carriage 6, and passengers started making their way there. Ryan was concerned about how I was feeling. Ryan supported me all the way, ensuring I wasn't left alone in my original carriage. Once we arrived at the dining car, he said, "Dr. Sullivan, don't take it too hard." I was truly grateful for Ryan. Unlike Jonathan's sharpness and coldness, Ryan continually encouraged me. "Everyone knows you're a good person. These things happen. There's nothing we can do about it." I waved my hand and smiled bitterly. "No one will blame you." Ryan handed me a cup of hot milk and noticed other passengers lining up at the other end of the carriage for fried eggs. He said he'd go get some for me. Before leaving, he still seemed worried and reassured me, "Don't blame yourself anymore." The soft music gradually faded, and the train attendant's melodic voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, dear passengers. I'd like to introduce the itinerary for this journey aboard the Ideal train. This trip will last 8 days, allowing you to experience the magical landscapes you can't see from San Fan Island. In just 8 short days, we will take you through the seasons, enjoying the cherry blossoms in April, the cicadas in July, the floods in October, and the snow in February. The attendant paused. Whenever you look out the window, it will be a visual feast you won't want to miss. Additionally, tonight there will be a luxurious ball in carriages 10 and 12, and we warmly welcome all passengers to join. I instinctively glanced outside, watching the cherry blossom trees fade into the distance. A full day and night had passed on this journey, leaving us with 7 days to go. If I can just endure these 7 days, I'll reach the place I long to visit. Suddenly, a woman's voice pulled my attention back from the window. Turning around, I saw her cradling her pregnant belly, anxiously staring at me. "Excuse me, have you seen my husband?" She held up her phone, showing a picture of the very face I least wanted to see at that moment. "If you see him, please tell him I'm waiting for him in carriage 16, the pregnant woman said urgently before stumbling off to ask others. The fact that the man had acquaintances on this train was terrible news for me. It meant I'd be continuously questioned about him, and each inquiry would feel like an interrogation of my soul. Watching her awkwardly weave through the crowd made my heart grow heavier. Some people in the crowd shared my carriage, their faces wearing a uniform mask of kindness as they listened intently to the pregnant woman. For our own selfish reasons, we mingled within the crowd, carefully concealing our secrets and maintaining a facade of normalcy. Yet, little did we realize that the man who collapsed was the pillar of a family, a father to an unborn child. We, those who supposedly made indelible contributions to San Fan Island, should have enjoyed recognition and accolades openly, yet we were being overshadowed by a darkness deep within us. One step at a time, we were losing our humanity for self-interest, hiding the truth. This realization filled me with immense struggle and pain. Was it really that important for me to leave San Fan Island? It was just a place. While I might not be able to go there now, surely I could one day, right? Why should I become someone I despise for the sake of a distant, elusive destination? I couldn't hold back any longer and stood up. "I've seen that man," I said as I approached her, my mouth already opening to speak. But in the noisy dining car, it seemed the pregnant woman didn't hear me and continued to look down, asking others. "Stop asking. The answer you seek is right here with me." Just as I was about to reach her, the attendant suddenly appeared in my path, bending down to ask the pregnant woman, "Do you need any help?" My heart skipped a beat. If she confessed, the train would launch a massive search, and discovering the locked storage compartment would be just a matter of time. Then the storage compartment would be pried open. If that man is dead, all of us who concealed his death will be exposed. If he's alive, the situation could get even worse. We could be accused of intentional murder, and that absolutely cannot happen. I must prevent that from occurring. I hurriedly stepped forward, but unexpectedly overheard the pregnant woman's response. "I don't need any help." I suddenly stopped in my tracks, feeling shocked. The pregnant woman forced a casual smile, effectively dismissing the attendant. "But if you could you please grab me a fried egg?" She clearly anticipated that once her husband's disappearance was revealed, the ideal train would turn back. No one wanted the ideal train to return mid-journey. Realizing this, I shamefully let out a sigh of relief. The two endings I had imagined earlier wouldn't come to pass. Perhaps there was a more optimistic outcome. This fragile pregnant woman might be stronger than I had thought. If she could rationally accept her husband's passing, we might not even need to turn back. In that case, I could go where I wanted, Mr. Blake could be saved, and everyone would be happy. At tonight's ball, I needed to tell her everything. I settled by the window, awaiting the night to fall. Outside, the blooming cherry blossoms of San Fan Island were no longer visible. We had unknowingly arrived at the next destination. The fields were beautifully arranged. The weather was clear, the sky was a bright blue, and the sunlight poured down, reflecting on the half-meter-high water channels. The green shoots seemed to be pulling moisture from the water, swaying gracefully like dancers in green dresses. In the distance, on a white wall, children were painting a vibrant, innocent mural. Occasionally, the pleasant sounds of cicadas and frogs could be heard. Surrounded by the sounds of cicadas and frogs, my previously tense nerves gradually relaxed, and I drifted into a dream. I often had strange and repetitive dreams. In my dream, I continuously performed surgeries for others, executing each movement skillfully and confidently, even without any assistance by my side. This was curious, as a surgical procedure in a hospital usually required at least 2 nurses. I didn't dwell on it, thinking that perhaps I felt overly confident in my dream and didn't need any help. I successfully removed the diseased organ, and the wound was beautifully sutured. The last step was to count the gauze, and the patient should be wheeled out of the operating room. I typically glanced at the patient's face after finishing a surgery, and this time was no exception. I looked over the patient's head, only to discover he was bald. My gaze slowly descended, and the blurred focus finally sharpened on his face, becoming clearer. Oh, I woke from the dream, drenched in cold sweat. I recognized the patient's face. It bore a striking resemblance to Mr. Blake. The only difference was that the Jonathan on the operating table appeared much younger. This was bizarre. Why would I dream about performing surgery on him? Upon waking, I told Mr. Blake about my dream as he passed by. He merely scoffed. "Dr. Sullivan, perhaps hearing about my illness has triggered your delusions of grandeur." I could hear the sarcasm in his voice. Ever since I expressed my intention to open the storage compartment, he had started to look at me with increasing disdain. Perhaps he had never been satisfied with me from the start, always scrutinizing me with a hawk-like gaze. I didn't want to make things awkward, so I looked down, feigning interest in my watch. To my surprise, it was already 10 o'clock at night. I had slept for a full 8 hours. Quickly getting up, I rushed toward carriage 10, unaware that Mr. Blake had stopped in his tracks behind me. His hawk-like gaze seemed to pierce through my back. The 10th carriage was empty. There was no sign of the ball, only a few attendants cleaning up the area and tidying up. It was too late. Should I continue on to find the pregnant woman in carriage 16? Or would it be more appropriate to backtrack to the sleeping quarters in carriage 3? Just as I was torn between the two choices, I suddenly heard a girl call my name, "Mark!" I paused in surprise and turned to see her tilt her head, revealing a delicate and beautiful face. I knew her. I certainly recognized her. She was my ex-girlfriend. The appearance of Emily Parker made me forget my plan to find Jessica and reveal the truth. We leaned against the window and sat face to face, the train weaving through the fields as I saw flashes of green fireflies outside. I couldn't recall the last time I had seen Emily. It felt like a long time, just long enough for me to get used to forgetting her, no longer actively thinking about her. Until she reappeared before me, all the past memories flooded back. It was also a summer night, calm and serene. I was walking hand in hand with Emily on campus, looking forward to a path that seemed endless. "Let's get married after graduation," she said, stopping in her tracks, a faint blush on her cheeks. A gentle breeze blew, causing some strands of her hair to fall. She gently tucked them behind her ear. I can't recall how I responded. I must have declined. She looked somewhat saddened, her nose slightly red as she said with a trembling voice, "What matters most is that we're together, isn't it? I don't care what others think of us. Being with you is all that matters." I remembered her determined gaze, like the bright stars in the night sky. "I don't want to go anywhere but be with you." I couldn't remember exactly what I said, but I distinctly recalled her passion, so intense that it felt impossible to reconcile with the calm woman in front of me now. She was still beautiful and gentle, but the youthful fervor had faded, leaving her with a serene grace. She wore a fitting white dress that accentuated her perfect figure. She still called me Dr. Mark Sullivan, though that hint of affection felt a bit distant and strange now, yet it still drew me in. Although I didn't remember the reason for our breakup, I still wanted to be with her. "Emily, it's been a long time," I said, unable to resist reaching out to lightly touch the top of her head. She gently dodged my hand, appearing indifferent, while I seemed overly eager. I knew I was being excessive, but I couldn't help wanting to talk more, to do more, hoping to rekindle her feelings for me. "Dr. Mark, would you like to step outside and take a look?" "Of course. If you're still single, why not come with me?" I invited her. She didn't decline or immediately agree. Instead, she rested her chin on her hand, silently studying me. I didn't know what she was observing, but her gaze reminded me of Jonathan, always scrutinizing, which left me feeling uneasy. "Dr. Mark, if you had another chance, would you still choose to be a doctor?" I nodded. "Of course. Healing others has always been my dream." "Then what do you think is more important to you, seeing the world or being a doctor?" I opened my mouth but couldn't find an answer. Then she asked, "What's the most important thing to you?" I hesitated in my mind between healing others, exploring the world, and my bond with Emily, unable to provide an answer. She wasn't in a rush, sitting quietly as if waiting for me to sort it all out. Women often like to hear what matters most to them. I wanted to make her happy and prioritize her. Exploring the world was my lifelong dream, but when I thought it over, the final answer became healing others. When I shared this thought with her, she burst into laughter. "Dr. Mark, you're still the same as before." Her laughter felt off to me. Although she was smiling, I sensed a lingering coldness in her eyes, like ancient glaciers. My memories of the past were hazy, and my conversation with her had become indistinct. I only remembered that I loved Emily deeply, and she loved me, but why we broke up still remained unclear. She called my name a few times before I snapped back to reality. I pressed her further, asking if she would come with me. She gently tapped the back of my hand. "I absolutely want to be with you." Then, she walked away in her high heels, step by step, playfully teasing my emotions. I was utterly captivated by her mystery and beauty. I couldn't wait to ask, "When I want to see you, which carriage should I go to?" Emily paused momentarily before changing direction. "No need to rush. I will come find you," she said. Today marked the 4th day since the train departed, with only 4 days left until our destination. Emily promised she would come looking for me, but I waited through the summer fields until leaves began to fall outside, still unable to find her. She was like a fleeting ghost that would only appear at night, vanishing in an instant. My anticipation gradually faded. I searched for her on the train for a whole 2 days, walking back and forth more than 100 times, confirming faces without seeing Emily. It felt like a surreal dream, leaving me increasingly worn out. Jessica walked by me again, her face reflecting the same exhaustion I felt, the fatigue of searching in vain. "Dr. Sullivan, have you seen him yet?" she asked. All eyes in the carriage turned to me, including those of Mr. Jonathan Blake, Ryan Fisher, and various familiar and unfamiliar faces. This was the 3rd time she had asked me. The first time was during breakfast, the second when I was desperately looking for Emily but couldn't find her, and now this 3rd time. I felt increasingly irritated. The last time I wanted to tell her the truth. She hadn't taken it seriously, yet now she was relentless in her questioning. The surrounding gazes made me uncomfortable. Why was everyone focused on me? Had they all been involved and chose to torment me instead? I felt like a criminal, overwhelmed by anxiety under interrogation. "Are you annoying or what? I told you I haven't seen him," I snapped, my usual calm demeanor slipping away as frustration bubbled up from my inability to find Emily. At that moment, Jessica's face turned pale. Her breathing became rapid as her eyes widened. She grasped the armrest of her seat, sweating profusely, gasping for air, and then slowly collapsed. Ma'am! My mind went blank, and I immediately turned back, kneeling to lift Jessica. In the chaos, I saw Ryan rushing over, shouting, "Clear the way! Don't crowd around her." She fainted from nutritional deficiency and lack of rest. I hurriedly took Jessica to carriage 3, where the attendant brought her a pot of hot water with brown sugar and set it on her bedside table. "It's quieter here. You need to rest. Don't push yourself like before." "Thank you, Dr. Sullivan," she replied softly, lowering her head in apology. "I'm sorry for my earlier outburst," I said as Jessica caressed her stomach, tears streaming down her face. She began to share the struggles she faced with her husband, the mutual support they provided each other. As she spoke, she suddenly broke down in tears. "Dr. Sullivan, I know I'm bothering you, but I just want to know where he is. It's already the 3rd day since he disappeared, and I still can't find him. I certainly understand he is important to you, just as Emily is to me." I felt a mix of anxiety and frustration, knowing we both shared these emotions. "But what happens if you tell me? Will you expose my faults in front of everyone? Can you control your actions and let this train continue on its journey? I sympathize with you, but what can I do? I want to go outside with Emily. That is more important to me than anything else. Dr. Sullivan, I beg you. Please, Dr. Sullivan, I'm begging you." At that moment, a sharp pain struck my head, and vivid, colorful flashes obscured the pale images haunting me. I saw people calling out to me, and I stood just an arm's length away from them, their hot tears even splashing onto my gloved hands. Different faces of various ages, men and women, dozens, even hundreds of them, all echoed the same plea in my mind. "Please help us." Among those faces was one I recognized well, a bald man. I had seen him in my dreams. I had performed surgery on him. He looked strikingly like Jonathan Blake. He clutched my white coat, his face filled with despair, tears streaming down his cheeks. A wave of pain surged through my head, causing me to stumble and knock over the water jug on the table. "Dr. Sullivan, are you all right?" Everything around me became chaotic, like snowflakes swirling, blurring my vision. Suddenly, someone rushed in through the door. "Mark, Dr. Sullivan." I was pulled away from carriage 3 by Jonathan, the last person I expected. "I just came to take a nap and heard someone calling for help," he explained, his voice laced with disbelief. I felt a mix of confusion. Jonathan had always been indifferent, so how could I trust his goodwill? From my perspective, Jonathan would prefer that something happened to me so that I wouldn't have to struggle with whether to reveal the man's death. I didn't believe someone like him, who couldn't even take care of his own well-being, would genuinely care about my life. Gradually, I regained my senses, and the cries that had entangled my mind faded away completely. "What happened just now in the room?" I asked. "Nothing. I just thought I was imagining things." Strange images popped up in my mind. I didn't want to explain those eerie white shadows and the crying people. I couldn't even clarify them for myself, nor did I want to reveal them to someone who already held a prejudice against me. "Mr. Blake," I suddenly called out to him, "are you sure I haven't operated on you before?" Jonathan froze at my words. "Why do you ask that? You just look so familiar to me." I smiled. "If not, then forget I asked." "No, I haven't. Do you have any relatives who have had surgery at our hospital?" I pressed. He answered firmly, "No." I yawned, pretending to be tired, wanting to take a quick nap. Just as Jonathan was leaving the room, I abruptly opened my eyes. Jonathan was lying. I was certain of it. Thank you for following my story up to this point. In this episode, we've witnessed a sudden accident, the death of a man, and the crucial choice I had to make. What hidden secrets lie behind this tragedy? In the next episode, we will unveil these mysteries and explore whether I can continue to keep this deadly secret or face even greater risks. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel to stay updated on the next chapter of our story.